Well, good morning, everybody. I think we're gonna go ahead and start. Welcome to the second day of the Evidence-Based Policymaking in Europe Summit that we've organized. I'm not sure if everyone was able to participate yesterday in day one, but I'll give a brief introduction of what we're talking about. Basically, the 5 projects have gotten together and we decided to organize this meeting because we think that the convergence of cloud, big data, and artificial intelligence has resulted in a major transformation across government services. And we think that policymaking itself needs to join into this transformation. So to support this transformation, like I said, the 5 projects, Policy Cloud, Decido, AI for Public Policy, Duet, and Intelcomp, which I am the coordinator of, have decided to use this event to come together to build synergies, to discuss what the challenges are with these new tools, to see how we can convert these tools into something useful for the public administration. And we wanted to discuss it with a wider audience so that you can share with us your experiences and your knowledge and what your opinions are. So the first plenary session, we have 4 speakers. Roberto de Bernardo is the first person who's going to speak. Before we start with the speakers, I think I have to, let me see if I can get this agenda going. Okay, like I said, like I was saying before, the objective of today. Yesterday we discussed the issues more with how evidence-based works in policymaking in general, and we went into specific experiences with the area of health, with the area of mobility and transport, and with climate change. And today we're going to go in a different area. So, like I said, today in the first plenary session we have 4 speakers. Roberto de Bernardo, Michael Mulquin, Suzanne Dumouchel, and Natalia Manola. I hope I didn't abuse the pronunciation. Roberto, you can go ahead and start sharing your slides while I briefly introduce you. Let's see, let me not share anymore. So Roberto is currently leading the Smart Government and Smart City subgroup of the Big Data Value Association and co-leading Smart Cities Domain Committee for Wire Foundation. Roberto is a senior researcher at the head of the Open Government R&D Group, part of the Open Public Service Innovation Lab. He's also acting as R&D Opportunity Network Developer for the entire public sector R&D area. And at this moment, he's coordinating Urban Age project, which his group is leading or is involved, among others, and also the Decido project. So, Roberto, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cecilia, and good morning all. It's a real pleasure for me being here today with you. During this presentation, I'm representing the Smart City, Smart Governance and Smart City sub-working group within BDVA. And my presentation will focus on data space as a key enabler for data society. This is more or less the point I will touch during my presentation. Briefly, I will give you a quick introduction about engineering, the company I work for. Engineering is a multinational company with headquarters in Italy, with more than 11,000 employees. We are an ICT company, started as a system integrator, but now the DNA of the company changed a lot. We also offer our own solution, in particular in terms of cloud-based solution. Sorry. I belong to R&D department of my company, and we are quite connected with several initiatives and networks at European level. I'm proud to give you an overview about some of those. So I were happy to have OASC represented today also during this panel session, and GaiaX, and of course Big Data Value Association. I'm now going to talk a little bit about the BDVA. BDVA, Big Data Value Association, is an industry-driven and in organization based in Belgium. Is a non-for-profit organization with more than 220 members distributed in between large industry, small and medium enterprise, and research and academia. The main aim of BDVA is accelerating data-driven innovation in Europe and sustain Europe's leadership on big data and AI. It started around 2014, and now it's evolving in creating a new partnership. It's towards the creation of European AI data and robotics partnership. So the new entity is called DAIRO, that will support the new partnership. So here, what is the evidence is that we move from a focus on big data, now including AI and robotics. Again, the main aim of DAIRO will be the leading the implementation of European data strategy, in particular towards the establishment of common European data space. This is the main focus of my presentation today. This is a picture about the structure of the association. It's distributed, divided in several task forces, of course, depending of the needs of the members of the association, in particular on the topics of research. Here I highlighted the task force 10 that is about the data sharing spaces, and now there is a new one emerging on trustworthiness of industrial AI. Then there are several verticals. I'm honored to lead one of those, that is the smart governance and smart cities one. I'm leading it together with Innova from Spain. Just some elements, some sentence regarding the smart governance and smart cities working group. This sentence represents the key starting point for this sub working group. You can find it in the mandate of the founding sentence of mandate. So the availability of new data source and the new data available definitely is opening a new perspective in management and decision making at city level. And big data and AI represent key enabler for exploiting this data. And on the other side, city represent a good environment where it's possible to implement a complete data chain involving all the required stakeholders. But there are several challenges to be overcome. And in particular, looking at some studies, it's clear we can have these challenges clear looking at the numbers, because only around 70% of government data are open for public access, and only 12% of city data are really used and analyzed for decision making. Of course, this is a real challenge to be faced with. But for this, the European Commission is pushing and giving instruments to support the society towards the digital transformation. In particular, it's important to define that the European data, important to talk about the European data strategy. And in part, the key element here, the key instruments, is the establishment of European data spaces. I would like to highlight here that for public sector and for cities, there are several data spaces identified for mobility, Green Deal, public administration, etc. This data space should be considered as environment driven by stakeholder, with a specific and sectorial data governance, reach of data with different degree of openness. So we are not talking about open data but we are talking about creating an environment with all potential kinds of data, and that are enabled by data sharing and pooling tools. The big BDVA provide a position paper on European government data sharing spaces, where the data space, the sharing, data sharing, the key element for data sharing is trust, the concept of trust, that is supported by 5 main pillars that goes from data, so the importance of free movement of data, but that requires definitely clear standard guidelines, in particular to evaluate, to define the market value of the data set. Governance, because definitely it's important to have that this European government data sharing space should be inspired by European rules and guidelines. Of course, one of these is the GDPR. People, because it's important that people recognize the value of data and get some fair compensation for sharing the personal data on one side, but also to support the labor market pushing for reskilling and upskilling. Of course, some change are required in the organizational point of view, because we need to embrace the data culture of sharing. So rethinking about the internal process, and of course the technology that allow to make this real. Of this could be established thanks to the collaboration from different stakeholder perspectives. So we need to put together academia, government, and industry in order to enable new business model, in particular looking at the business to business, but also business to government, government to business, and also business to science, and vice versa. And the perspective from citizen is also important to be taken into account. These two potentially create new opportunities, just thinking about the use of private data for new public service. I'm thinking, for example, telco data from telco industry, but also from bank environment. So the opportunities, I highlighted the one related to government and public body, in particular for citizen, considering my perspective of smart governance and smart cities. So for sure, as mentioned, you can leverage on data for better government services, increase the service offered thanks to AI capabilities, real-time European statistics. So it's about smart statistics, improving the evidence-based policy making, and providing and using data as evidence for policy compliance. On the other side, opportunity for citizens, so increase and let them to have full control over their data, personal data, but at the same time sharing their data to have more personalized public service. Again, opportunities, but also challenges that could be subdivided in two main big groups. So the internal organizational concern, but also intra-organizational concern. About the first one, there is the lack of legal and ethical framework, and also we need governance model here that an important the important role of trust intermediaries to guarantee data quality, reliability, and fair use of data. And of course, we need emerging to let best practice emerging, but also standards. Regarding the intra-organizational challenges, I would mention again, as anticipated, to determine the value of data. So giving a clear evidence of this, but also on the other side, creating the right balance in between the perceived value of data and the risk of exposing this data and sharing this data with third parties. So with the related risk of losing control over the data. This is some I would like to bring you towards this result from a survey conducted by PTVA in order to prepare the position paper, where the key point here is who should drive the efforts and how. Well, the answer is clear. The response there was the idea is the key actor are both policymaker and industry together to drive this process. And in terms of timing, we are talking about short and medium term, so in between 2 years and 5 years. It's clear now that if we look at the European strategy with both the European Horizon Europe and the Digital European Program, this is the time window we are looking at. Call for action discussed. It's from the result from the survey is that there are some action really considered as urgent, like the convergence, so making awareness, in particular, creating an alignment about all the activities at the moment moving on in the different regions of Europe. Another element is the experimentation part, so invest to test drive cross-sectoral, cross-border use case, but also on the standardization part. Then there are the need more in the medium term for deployment, for the deployment part. Of course, transversally, there is the need of creating the right awareness from now until 2030, with increasing more and more while deployment activities are going on. In order to, this slide is my last slide. It's about some activity and, of course, action put by the European Commission in order to support all I have discussed about. In particular, there are, as anticipated, the Horizon Europe and Digital European Program are moving to supporting the experimentation and the creation of the right awareness, but also the deployment part. I'm thinking about the testing experimentation facilities, the European Digital Innovation Hub, and there are specific one thought for smart cities and public sector. And also thanks to other movement like Living in .eu movement that is pushed again by the European Commission, in particular the Unit C3 behind. It was already discussed yesterday, and I would like to mention here it again, that is pushed for a citizen-centric approach, a city-led approach at the European level. I would like also to mention that is pushing for open standard and technical specification, in particular leveraging the minimum interoperable mechanism from OASC that Michael will tell you about more in the next speech. And putting an overall framework based on data space, local data platform, and local digital twin, within the framework of sustainable goals, putting together sustainability goals and digital transformation needs. This is my last slide. I would like to thank you for the opportunity. Enjoy the rest of the session. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roberto. That was very, very interesting, and you really centered the debate in the opportunities and the challenges and the whole issues we had with respect to trust in data and the need for, like you said, the alignment. What we'll do is we're going to go ahead and with the next speaker, Michael. While you're sharing your screen and your slides, I'll go ahead and introduce you. Michael is the Minimal Interoperable Mechanism Ambassador of the Open and Agile Smart Cities Network. He has spent nearly 30 years partnering with cities, rural areas, and industry on how technology can help neighborhoods and cities work better. He is chair of the Smart City Systems Committee for International Electronic Commission, and he is an active member of the Smart Cities Standard work with that work. He is co-chair of the IEC, ESO, ETU Joint Smart Cities Task Group, among other things. Michael, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your experiences. When you're ready, go ahead.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And can you see my screen? Fantastic. So thanks, Roberto, for setting, if you like, the big picture of the technology. I'm kind of going down now into a bit more of the practical tools that cities can use. MIMs, it's a strange word, but we'll find out a bit more about it very soon. So the big issue, of course, is here we've got an event that's looking, it's for policy making, and it's looking at how evidence can support policy making. And this is very important because we know that communities often find it difficult to achieve their goals. Policymakers often are struggling to make sure that the policies that they develop and implement actually work. So we know the kind of goals of the community. It's really all about citizens' lives, business, sustainability, all of these things. But as we try and develop the right policies, we find often they don't work. And there are two reasons for that. But, well, first of all is the reason of the challenges that policymakers face. We're in a very tough situation. We know we've got climate change and other very big issues facing us as a civilization. And at the same time, cities, communities often have limited resources to tackle those things. And so find themselves almost helpless in the face of the big challenges they have to deal with. But the other factor is not the external challenges, but more the internal challenge. And that's about the complexity of communities. And the problem is that when policymakers are trying to tackle these huge challenges they face, they find that the communities they're trying to manage and help, it's very difficult to know what's going on. First of all, the fact is that communities have many different stakeholders, which have many different sets of goals, all of which are legitimate. And it's very difficult to know how to manage all of these different and legitimate goals at the same time in a way that's not going to play one off against the other. So that's the one issue about complexity. But the other one is the lack of comprehensive, accurate and up-to-date information about the city systems. Very often, policymakers have to rely on incomplete information about what's going on. There's lots that they don't know about. Even what they know about is often out of date, and it may well be inaccurate. It might be, that's how we did things 2 years ago, but now we do things differently. But policymakers may not be aware of all of those things. And particularly, policymakers don't understand how all of the different systems within a city or within a country work together and the dependencies and the interdependencies of them. So this is a big challenge for policymakers. How on earth can they deal with the complexity of the communities that they're trying to help? And that means there's two problems, or there is really one problem. It's very difficult for policymakers to identify what the optimal policies should be. And often managers are having to work on trial and error basis to make a best guess at what might work. And see if it works, and if it does, great, and if it doesn't, then try something else. And that means that often the policies that they develop aren't that successful in achieving their goals, and almost certainly don't ensure that every single goal can be helped to be developed at the same time. So it's a big challenge. So that's why we're here together looking at evidence-based policy development, and the need there, and it's the data spaces idea is looking at it, if you like, in the big picture, but we need to find how we can gather that comprehensive and accurate information that will help policymakers do a good job. Many ways you can define a smart community. I think this is a good way of doing it. That when we're thinking about a smart community, it's one where increasing amounts of useful data are collected and used by the public administration, by business, and by the citizen to help the city work better. So that's the value of new technology, really. There are many technical solutions or innovative solutions to little bits of city issues and national issues. But the great value that new technology has brought is it's providing us with the opportunity to gather lots of data about what's happening in the city. And that data at the moment is being gathered by separate agencies and institutions within the city. But the opportunity there is to bring that data together and analyze it as a whole, and so that there's comprehensive and aligned picture of what's happening in the city. And because of that, cities everywhere are setting up local data ecosystems, how they can pull that information together in one place and start to look at it and learn from it and use it to underpin their policy making. But of course, this is not easy. When we're looking at the issue of setting up such a local data ecosystem, there are many things that need to be taken into consideration at the same time. And this is the problem. So this is not policymakers' problem. This is our problem. Open and agile smart cities, engineering, the projects that we're talking about here, is how we can help gather that information and make it available in the right way. And what are all the barriers that need to be done? How to manage personal data, security, how to find out what data is available, who's got it, what conditions is it made available on, how I can satisfy the data owner that I'm going to use their data responsibly so they'll allow me to do it, how to link context data together, how to use data to manage physical assets. Lots and lots of issues, different kinds of issues that all need to be sorted at the same time, because otherwise that local data ecosystem won't be able to provide that comprehensive, accurate information that policymakers need. So that's where Open and Agile Smart Cities is aiming to be helpful to make that easier. As a network, we've got 168 cities in membership in over 30 countries. As you can see, we're global, but we have our heart in Europe. We have a very strong foundation in Europe, and we grew from Europe because, in fact, it started as a network of EU smart city related project coordinators back in 2010. And as they started to share information and learn from each other, slowly this idea of having a joint network came to place, and we were launched in Brussels back in 2015 with, right at the very heart of what we were going to do, a network of cities that were open, willing to work together, willing to move quickly to gain value from new technologies and so on. But the heart of it is basic interoperability tools to support data sharing. And the idea, the real focus of our work is how we can work together to make that happen. So MIMs, if you haven't heard of them, it stands for Minimal Interoperability Mechanism. And what we're looking at here, Roberto's mentioned standards, and standards are really important, but standards can be quite complex, and there are so many standards that you need to think about together. And what we're trying to do in Open and Agile Smart Cities is to simplify all the complexity of standards and to provide cities and industry with a set of minimal but sufficient capabilities that will achieve interoperability of data systems and services. So what we're trying to do by a whole set of minimal interoperability mechanisms is to answer this question. What are all the basic building blocks needed to enable a city to set up an effective data sharing ecosystem? And our work is to help to pull those building blocks together so that cities can gain value from them. So these mechanisms, the idea is to have them sufficient interoperability to allow good enough. We're not looking for perfection here. And some people, especially standards people, and I'm a standards person, we think, no, you know, this is heresy. But actually, the idea is that you can often get 80% of the benefit from 20% of the fulfilling 20% of the requirements. And what we're trying to do is to say, can we at least get cities moving together on good enough integration? How can we make it minimal so that there's no unnecessary complexity or time to implement it for cities, so they can move quickly to put them into practice, but at the same time making sure that they're not wishy-washy, fuzzy, but they're clearly defined, so a city can say, in order to implement this minimal interoperability mechanism, this is what I need to do. Okay, I've done it, and now I'm complying with it. And that means that it makes it very easy for cities to work together, and it makes it very easy for industry to provide the sorts of products and services that cities need. So we've got 10 in our list. We haven't done them all. We're working through them. But what we're trying to do is to identify all of the key issues that need to be sorted and step by step put in place that effective building block that cities can use. And the key thing to remember in all of this is that we're not inventing or reinventing the wheel here. What we're doing is to build on existing work, all of the important standards that are being developed by many international and national standards bodies. And what we're trying to do there is, what we're doing there is we're working closely with those standards bodies, and we're understanding what are the core requirements of those standards, what are the most important ones for cities, so that we can give cities a really good starting point to implement those standards. And if there are several standards that are sort of competing, that are covering the same ground or overlapping with each other, then what we're doing is finding what the lowest common denominator or the pivotal point of interoperability is, so that we can enable cities that are following different standards paths to still have a way of ensuring that what they're delivering is interoperable. And there's an opportunity again there, as we identify these things, to help make sure that products and services that will help cities can be put together. And it's only when there's nothing there at the moment we do something new. But even there, what we're doing is building on where policy and procurement already. So where there's already a clear objective, policy objective that needs some technical support, then we work on focusing on what kind of technology support is needed to enable that policy objective to be met. So the state of the MIMs, we've got the first three MIMs, which are the fundamental ones. They're already being specified by many cities in procurements, and we continue to need to, we can't say we've done it, because technology moves on, and also because as cities deploy them, we learn and we can just tweak them a bit, but they're out there. We've got 3 working groups that are busily developing 3 MIMs. One is on personal data management, and that takes account of the fact that there are a number of initiatives, particularly around Europe, looking at how a citizen can be put in the center of their own data and can be in charge of how that data is used. And what we're wanting to do there is to say, this is great, there's a vibrant ecosystem growing up, but at the moment there are many, many options before cities and they don't link very well together. How can we help to align all of these things so that as this moves forward, there's at least a certain basic interoperability between the different approaches, so that citizens can indeed keep in charge of the data that is developed, that they're developing and is around them. So that's personal data management. We're working on another one which is about fair and transparent AI, and that's, as Roberto mentioned, this is a really important tool that cities communities are now able to use. But the question is, when they use it to help with decision making, how fair is it? How transparent is it? And we know there's been some horrible instances where it's gone wrong. And what we're doing in our Fair AI MIM is to look at what are the minimum processes and technologies that a city can put in place to give it the confidence to know that the AI it uses will work. And then we're looking at geospatial, because as we look at digital twins, there is a certain amount of geospatial already in the basic MIMs, but we need to be able to help cities know how they can add all of the geospatial issues that they need to take account of in digital twins to help them in their work. So we're building on those three things. And the idea is to get each of them to the stage where they can be tested in 6 months. We're working hard on that so that we can get something that cities can then start to test, check it works, give us feedback about improvements that are needed. And the aim is that in another 6 months, this will be something that can then be reliably used in procurements and cities can start to implement. And then another 6 months, then we start to work on the next set of minimum interoperability mechanisms and start moving things forward. So we've got a rapid roadmap. Our aim is to get tools ready for cities that they need to help them develop their local ecosystems. And all of that, as we said at the beginning, is because of the policy. We're not doing this because we love technology. We're not doing it so that cities can be proud of their digital ecosystem. We're doing it so that cities, countries, and Europe as a whole can help deliver on their policy agendas. So we're very much focused on, as Roberto's mentioned, the Living in the EU initiative, and helping to deliver, working with them. We've got the tech steering group next week, where we'll be taking our MIMs to them for their views and so on, to how to make sure that what we're doing is in line with what Europe is doing, and so on. And we're benefiting, and again, we're building links with what you're doing here. What we want to do is, as you find stuff out, how we can help and serve you and do a better job for you. So we're on a journey, all of us. How can we make better policy in Europe, in our cities, and what technology and what support can be developed to help ensure that there's the evidence to make that policy work. So as part of this whole process, this big community that's trying to make sure that Europe can move forward in the most optimal way to benefit the citizens, to ensure sustainability. We're part of that big community, and we'd very much appreciate if any of you would like to work with us to help us in developing the MIMs that will support all the great work that all of you are doing. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Michael. We'll take you up on that invitation. I'm very, very sure of that. Like you said, I think that these minimal interoperable mechanisms to support the decision making, specifically in the cities, is very interesting for our projects, and it complements well with what Roberto is talking about with the data spaces themselves and how they support data for society and for policy making. Thank you. We're going to go to our next speaker, which is going to give another perspective about Suzanne. Can you, while you're getting your slides ready and putting your camera, I'll briefly introduce you. Suzanne Dumouchel, I hope I'm pronouncing it okay, is one of the directors of the European Open Science Cloud Association. She has a PhD in French literature and is a research engineer at the CNRS, which is the French National Center for Scientific Research. She works in Human Newman Unit, which is a large infrastructure for digital humanities. She leads the European project GOTriple, which aims to develop a platform for data discovery, research projects, and researchers in social sciences and humanities. So I think that she's going to give a very interesting perspective for us today. And Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you very much. So what I'd like to suggest today for you is something how we can switch from the policymaking to the society needs. And I would like to take a few examples to highlight some of the options that we have. So it's completely another scope than the previous presentation that we have. So I think it's quite a complementary usage in order to involve better the society and to influence much more the policymaker. So Let's start. So I will just very quickly show that the first step related to the European Open Science Cloud is the role of the EOSC association. It's also a way, because it's the concrete way where to influence the policymakers and to make use of the voice of the different scientific communities. Indeed, the role of the EOSC association, the different roles, the first one is to promote the voices of the scientific community at the EOSC steering board level through the update of the strategic research and innovation agenda, the SRIA, and the different task forces of the EOSC association. But the role is also to increase interdisciplinarity between researchers, but also with public and private sector. So to develop new knowledge and new and common activities between the researcher and on a broader level with public and private sector. But it's also a way to learn from each other, because this is the first way to become stronger before going to discuss with the policymakers, learning from each other on scientific, technical, and legal matters related to scientific services development. It's also, the EOSC association can also contribute to identify the next disruptive technologies and sciences and create innovation for societies at large. And also by addressing the societal challenges by providing useful and relevant services for the societies. So this is a very, very quick focus on the EOSC association, just to show how it is a first step. It is a first step to move from the policymakers to the identification of the needs coming from the society and the scientific communities. But more concretely, let's see how the EOSC services can serve the scientific community. And here I'd like to take some example coming from the SHOC project. So SHOC is currently, so it's a project coordinated by Cesar Eric, which gathers 50 partners almost. And the role of this project is to build the social science and humanity cluster of the EOSC. So one of the main aspects of the SHOC project is to organize a transition from disciplinary silos and separate e-infrastructure into a cloud-based infrastructure for scholars. And this work is done mainly through the activity around fair data and tools and training services. And as you can see here in the picture, it takes into account computing, networks, software, and content in order to gather that into this cloud-based infrastructure for scholars. But we can also see the diversity of the stakeholders of SHOC, which open to the public and private sectors. So you can see on the schema that, of course, SHOC is addressing the researcher needs, but also the university and research performing organization or the research funding organization. But much larger than that, the SHOC project addresses the needs of research libraries and archives, or research and e-infrastructure in part of the EOSC thematic cluster, and the private sector and industry player, or the civil society, for instance. And the biggest focus here of the SHOC project is really to provide training and training material on an international and cross-disciplinary basis. One of the main tool of one of the main output, I would say, of this SHOC project is the SSH Open Marketplace. This marketplace is a discovery portal for social science and humanities resource. It is focused at first on the tools and services developed for the social science and humanities researcher, and around the tools and services have been built and linked several other kinds of resources, such as training materials, workflow, dataset and publications that enrich the complete experience of the researcher to improve his or her research. And the three guiding principles here of this platform, this SSH Open Marketplace, are the contextualization, the curation, and the community. So we can have very quickly an example through the transcribus use cases. So you can see here on the picture that at some point, some kind of old document or written, handwritten document are not very easy to analyze and to reuse or even to share or to annotate. So this is one of the issues that can face a social science and humanities researcher. So then, thanks to the SSH Open Marketplace, the researcher can find a specific tool, the handwritten text recognition, for this case, the HTR, which train the machine to read paleographic materials. So it's a way, it is based on the usage of other models to help reading your own material. And for the researcher, it also provides an interface for the own transcription of the researcher. So this is one of the tools that is used, that is offered through the SSH Open Marketplace, with a lot of training materials and data and workflow to make easier for the researcher the usage of these tools. And I'd like to finish on this example on the SHOC project by showing you the 32K exploitable result of the SHOC project. Of course, I won't enter into the detail of all of them, but what is interesting here is that in this project, we have some key exploitable results provided only for the social science and humanities community in brown, and in blue, some that are multidisciplinary, so that can be used also for all the scientific community. And these key exploitable results are gathered in some very main topics, such as data management, processing and analysis, sharing and discovery, training and support, SSH community, and dataset. So here, all these services, this output, this key exploitable result, and of course the SSH Open Marketplace are part of the EOSC and make contribute to improve the quality of the research in social science and humanities. So let's move now to the last example, which is more focused on the EOSC services and the public sector. And here I'd like to take the example of the discovery platform for another discovery platform. Before you had the portal, and now it's a platform for social science and humanities resource, which is named GOTriple. So this platform is the result, the main output of the triple project that Cecilia mentioned, that I am coordinating currently. It's also a project funded by the Horizon 2020 program. And the goal of this platform is to provide a multilingual discovery solution for SSH, and especially by giving a single access point that allows researcher, and not only, as we will see, not only researcher, to explore, find, access, and reuse publication and data, the first kind of resource, projects, the second kind of resource, and researcher profile at European scale. So what is interesting in this platform is that thanks to these three different kind of resource, data, publication, profiles, and project, we provide a different experience of discovery, textual discovery with thanks to a textual search engine, but also visual discovery, a crowdfunding platform which helped here to discover the projects and even to fund them for the citizens, the journalists, the companies, so to create collaboration between public sector and public and private sector with the researcher. A recommender tool, another way to discover the SSH output, and a social network when you can share and develop collaboration. So let's here again take a very quick discovery use case. So I'm a startup, and my goal is to provide apps for museum, but for that I need to find usable data. So I can use the GOTriple platform, where I can find textual and visual, and I can have a textual and visual discovery of this usable data. These data have been enriched previously through a specific process via a semantic enrichment and a multilingual enrichment. But I also, as a startup, I also can search through the profiles for potential collaboration, and even then create a project which can be crowdfunded between a researcher and myself, my company, to develop my apps and to develop specific collaboration for having better apps to propose to the museum. So this is the kind of very quick use case of example of collaboration that we can create through the GOTriple platform between the public and private sector and the scientific community. And for doing so, I'd like to explain a bit more how we made the identification of the user requirements. So we worked with academic and non-academic stakeholders. In particular, we carried out 37 in-depth qualitative interviews to question their working practices and what they can require from such a platform. We conducted semantic analysis of the interview to discover themes and developed a range of persona and scenario. So regarding the persona, we had at the end 8 persona, 2 non-academic and 6 academic. And they highlighted the pain points and the goal that each interview encounter for the platform. And then from this persona, we built the scenario to highlight how they make use, how these people can make use of the GOTriple platform. So it was a way for us to build scenario narrative of the persona to foster discussion around the functionality of the platform. And this scenario have been used then in our different co-design workshops. So the definition of the user requirement came from the scenario narrative that have been transformed into scenario steps, so the list of the user activities. Then we had the list with more formal definition of the user requirement to give us actually the basis to the functionality, the concrete functionality of the platform and the production of the interface prototypes. So this brings us to the main impact of the project, the user orientation, on which I will come back in my last slide on the conclusion. A strong ties, as you can see, between the research, the industry, and the society. It's also a way to reconnect culture and science. And of course, this is the main, not the main impact, but the main link to my presentation, the integration into the European Open Science Cloud by contributing to the objective of open science. So as a sort of conclusion, let me say that here in the different example I showed, the collaboration, co-design process and user-centered approach are actually, it's not an is, but are, sorry, at the heart of these social science and humanities services, but also at the heart of what is expected for a useful EOS for scientific community and even broader. So these are practices very powerful to have greater impact rather than using indicators. And to me, this is something I'd like to highlight because we are today driven by indicators coming from our policymakers, but actually these indicators don't say a lot and don't support us to have better impact. I think having co-design process and user-centered approach are much more powerful than the indicators. But these practices are also very powerful to involve societies, researchers, and citizens to facilitate the serendipity of research, develop innovation, and address the societal challenges. So thank you very much, and I'm glad to answer to any question if you have some.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. I think your perspective is complemented very well with the previous speakers. Although it's very different for us, it's at least for this this cloud cluster that we formed. For us, it's very important that the dimension of science and technology and innovation as the basis for the public-private participation, for involving the citizens. I think the human dimension of is very important that you discussed and you presented. So we're going to be able to talk in the panel section once we're finished with the 4 panelists. Our next speaker, Natalia Manola, she's I'm going to present you briefly. Natalia is the CEO of Open Air, a pan-European e-infrastructure supporting scholarly communication and open science in Europe. Natalia holds a physics degree from the University of Athens, a master's of science Electrical and Computer Engineering and from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, has worked several years as a software engineer and architect in bioinformatics and commercial sector. She has expertise in open science policies, implementation, and has served in the European Open Science Cloud Executive Board from 2019 to 2020, and in the Open Science Policy Platform in years before that. So she's also part of the high-level advisory committee to provide advice about development implementation of open science policy in Europe. And of course, she's also collaborator and partner in Intelcomp. I wanted to add that also. Natalia, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. Let me just start my timer. Okay, so I'm really glad, first of all, to be the last one here, because what I would like to iterate is from the previous speakers. I heard the word communities, I heard the word complexity and speed of change, data, transparency, accuracy, and trust, standards and interoperability, and all of it in context. So I was really glad because these are some of the things that I will be talking about. So my talk here is about the open data as a means and a vehicle for transparent STI, science, technology, and innovation monitoring and assessment. So I'm going to be capturing on the policies on STI as an input. Let me see. Okay. What is the new environment of policy? I think, many speakers yesterday discussed about it, but I would like to stress three things. Is that we are living in a, I would say, in a rather complex environment where everything is interconnected. In science, technology, and innovation, what we see is a chain of models, a complex systems with multiple actors and multiple pathways. And what we want for sustainability in the future is a participatory policy style. And this is what we are aiming. Then the second thing is that we see digitalization. So this is all over the place. Europe is going over digital transformation and also now green transformation, which is reshaping innovation. So what is it? Why is it important? Because data is everywhere. It's a data-driven processes, and which is speeding up the innovation cycle. So the innovation cycle, in a few decades before, from design to product and to user feedback took us some years. Now it's almost instantaneous. Then the policy intelligence. So how can we make policy more intelligent and more fit for purpose? So the streamlines of big data, AI-assisted policy modeling approach to augment human judgment for evidence-informed policymaking. All of this has been said, yesterday by many speakers in many, different ways. But this is something that is the core in STI. And then if we think about, the wide range of actors involved, all of them are involved in the science, from the input to the output to the innovation, in different interests, different intervention points. Researchers, research managers at local institutions or funders, industry, policymakers, who are the policymakers that are shaping the policy for science, how science and technology will be shaped in the future, but also they are the recipients of science results. And then, of course, the public, which is involved everywhere. This is a cycle. I tried to put this in a diagram. It was not easy. It's a cycle, or concentric cycles, circles, where it's not clear now. Somebody talked about the fuzziness. It's not clear where the intervention points and where the interactions are happening. Probably everywhere, but this is hard to capture. So what are the characteristics now in this new policy environment of tracking and assessment of STI? First of all, like every other policy, it's evidence-based. Then it's automated, and I will say why it's automated. So in my next slide, sustainable. What does it mean sustainable? So when we mean sustainable, it's we need to be tracking long term, repeatedly, but also sustainable that is in a manner that is accepted by the communities, by the people. So it's comprehensive. So in STI, we're looking now, the range is broader, so it's not just academia, it's industry, it's public. So this means that we are trying to get this 360 view. Granular. Granular means we need an in-depth analysis to identify pathways and gain understanding. Why is this important? Because the different intervention points and the different decisions in policymaker differ on how we view things. You know, what is the lens that we are viewing things, and what are we shaping? And last but not least, it's trustworthy. Trustworthy, why? Because science, and we all know what's happening now with science. We know about scientific facts. We know about scientific decisions. We know about technological decisions that affect our everyday lives. So what we need to have is an STI, in policy, an STI that is trustworthy, that we can trust the people who are taking these decisions. And this is a characteristics that will lead and guide to a buy-in from the citizens and the public. So that's the context of the STI. Now, where does open data, big data, and AI come into? Why open data? So open data for us is a means of identifying research outcomes easily, no barriers to evidence. So there are billions. I didn't put the graphs here, but there are billions in science and technology research, and there are many outcomes, but we can't easily identify them. So we need to invent transparency in the assessment. When we are assessing, sorry, because something is popping up in my computer. When we are assessing STI, when we are assessing researchers, when we are assessing innovators, when we are assessing institutions, we need to have a transparency. So this is something that all the actors have a need for that. And then what it is that we are allowing more players to enter the game, which is more opportunities for innovation, because the way things are now in the scientific endeavor is just a few players in the game, big players in the game, mainly from the publishing side, who are becoming information companies, but they are just hanging on the content, not allowing the innovation of the smaller players. And then when we say it's not about open data, but it's also about open science, and where does open science come into? Suzanne mentioned a few in this. Sharing results in the early stages. Why do we want that? We want to know what's happening, when it happens, so we can be more responsive. Policy can be more responsive. And this is, for example, a very good example is the COVID crisis and the pandemic. Involvement of citizens. So we need to have the citizen science. It's not just about the citizen science in the science, but also the citizens in participating and participatory think in the decision and policy making. And also where open science comes into place is the need for advanced digital skills, because when you are dealing with open science, and now we're talking also about a digital and a data-intensive science, digital skills are very important. And this is where this whole thing comes into place, is because when you're publishing data, you're not keeping it in a drawer, you know how to make sure that you publish it the right way, the fair way. You need all of these skills that are important. Okay, and where big data comes into place when we're talking about scientific results. I just copied this from the 2021 STM Association, the Global Grief and Economics and Market Size. So what we see here is that each year we have a growth of publications, and we are talking about a number of, if I'm not mistaken, about a number from 4 to 4.5 million publications every year. That means scientific publications. That means is, the results, the scientific results are getting big. These are accompanied by data, by software, by products, other research products. And this is hard, something very hard to digest, digest from the input side, how do I make, where does science and technology is going, so I can make as a policymaker my decisions, but also on the end side, on the receiving side, where researchers and research communities, they need to know the latest, or the public, they need to know the latest. So big data here is at play, and AI is also at play, because usually when you have big data, AI is a no-brainer. Why? Because a lot of this data, scientific publications data, first of all, it's not clean. Even the metadata records are not clean. We're talking about interoperability, and we're asking everyone to be interoperable, but we need to give them the tools in order to make it happen in a very easy way. AI tools will allow us to enrich this, to enrich this data, to get information out of this data, and to make and transfer this information into knowledge. So this is very important. Now, where does OpenAIRE come into? I didn't introduce myself properly, so I will introduce myself now. OpenAIRE is a key partner or one of the partners in Intelcom, and this is where I say that open science meets artificial intelligence. So OpenAIRE is a non-profit organization. We are a European infrastructure on open scholarly communication, where our mission is to shift things towards openness. So I will not go over this, but what we have is members in all of Europe, and these members are building open science communities at their institutions and their countries. And this is very much related to what Suzanne said about the European Open Science Cloud. I will be talking about our interaction with Intelcom. So in OpenAIRE, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a big global data space, because the previous speakers discussed about data space for scientific results. So what do? We gather publications linked to data and software, people, organizations, processes, facilities, and we have processes through standards, interoperability, but also through AI to link all of this together. How can this be used? This can be used for discovery, for researchers, tracking and monitoring for open science. This is how we use it. And it's a core source in the European Open Science Cloud. So just to give you some numbers, this is what we consider a global CRIS system in the research information system. With 102 million publications, we're gathering about 15 to 20 million full text, 12 million data items linked together, and software research products. And all of this is linked to the funders, the funding agencies, and to other authoritative registries. And I have put dots because what we're trying is to make it comprehensive and trustworthy and authoritative. So think about a linked open science data space. So on the OpenAIRE side, we are collecting and we're augmenting this data space using AI techniques in order to do, for example, classifications. We need to know who's who, how results are linked to various research communities, how they are linked to SDGs, for example, NACE, economic results, or domain specific. We're trying to find links between different objects. This object could be data or publications or software organizations. We're trying to correlate, to group things together, to find collaborations, to find scientific trends. Now we are trying to find, innovations. So how can the technology, the scientific results, how can they be turned, are they discussing about innovation in technology, technological readiness and insights? And in Intelcom, what we are doing is, we are putting this, the OpenAIRE graph and the data space we're building with other partners in Intelcom, a data space where this OpenAIRE graph will be one of the data of the wider data because when we are doing policy making, this open air is just one part of the picture. Then we are collecting data that will help the policymakers in STI do more comprehensive policy making, connecting things together. So imagine, for example, policy documents, imagine databases from that relate to innovation. So this is what we see as the way forward, and what we would like to see is that players around Europe and the world, and especially, you know, this is happening at the national level. So, for example, Cecilia and Fatigue, the organization in Spain, is doing exactly that. And this is something that we would like open air and open air members to embrace and promote in their countries. What we are saying is that this journey of open data, big data, and AI in the scientific domain has just started. And it has started, you know, as I said, and I will keep on repeating that, is first to serve the research communities for discovery reasons and for navigation reasons, and to make their life easier, but also for the policy makers, because, you know, they are a key actor in this whole game, and they need to be very much involved. So this was what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. All my information is here, so you can contact me anytime.
Thank you, Natalia. Yeah, I fully agree with you that you wrapped up really well and packaged really well the three previous presentations and what the interrelations are. Now we have 15 minutes for some debate. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides, which let's see if I can get this correct here. I think, does everyone see my screen? Okay. So I have the questions there for everybody, and I guess we can start with the first question, and we'll go in order of the presentations if you have some reflections, or if you have another issue you would like to reflect on. But based on what you presented, Roberto, what are the tangible opportunities, like the real-time information, predicted impact, gathering citizen input for these new technologies, and the interoperable data spaces that you were talking about in policymaking? If you could.
Well, I can just put on table some concrete example. For example, if we consider the use, if we consider an actual implementation of a data space where it's possible to share different data and implemented the models I'm talked about, in particular the P2G model, so business to government. There is one concrete aspect I discussed with other colleagues, for example, from the National Statistical Institute, from different countries, in particular from Italy. We had a conversation with the ISTAT, but also from France and from the Netherlands. There is a huge amount of potential source of information that could be used in order to implement new or what they call smart statistics. In particular, I'm referring to data from, as mentioned, data from telco operator in order to know better position of people moving around in cities, but also payment information. These represent a huge amount of information that could be used by the National Statistical Institute to provide with new statistics that can be at the same, on the other side, leveraged for implementing better public services for people, so having impact on society. So this represents a real an example on the possible opportunities that opening up this the data and creating actual data space could provide.
Thank you, Roberto. Michael, what is your opinion about that? About tangible opportunities for data interoperable data spaces and policymaking? And I know that your presentation was about that, but maybe a little bit more about the challenges, I guess, because I think we have to find the equilibrium there between the opportunities and the challenges.
We do indeed. I mean, I think the opportunities are interesting because what you've got are two things happening at once. You've got the technology is developing fast and people are getting experience in using it, which is great. But the other thing is that the kind of policy drive, particularly in Europe, for things like the data spaces, is really important because, and digital twins, because what that means is over the next few years, you're going to get real scale. You know, it's the challenge at the moment is that communities are trying to implement these things in general in isolation from each other and in slightly different ways. And what these big initiatives that Europe is going to be pushing out over the next year and beyond are going to help to align these things. And the great value is actually that it's also going to bring in the small and medium-sized cities. You know, up till now, we've seen the wealthier, the more influential or pioneering cities are being able to use data to support evidence making and evidence that can support policy. But it's been a real challenge for the vast majority of cities around Europe and around the world to gain value from this. And I think because of this new policy initiative that funding is coming and all kinds of other issues like that, it's going to be much easier now to get this not just in the bigger cities, but where most people live in the smaller cities around Europe. And I think that's going to make a big difference to many people who are at the moment not being touched by the benefits of that. I think in terms of the challenges, just very simply, of course, it's great to have the tools available, but actually for policymakers to change the way they think, you know, that they've grown up used to making policy, if they say, by the seat of their pants in a way, like, you know, it's like very, you know, responding to all sorts of different drivers and things like that. And actually the fact that now they can have much better, clearer evidence from the scientific community, from industry, from all the other players to underpin what they're doing, it's going to mean they've got to have a mindset shift and start to benefit from that. I think one thing that's going to help is the fact that policy will become, hopefully, with these drivers, more transparent. And I think it's going to be easier for citizens to get a better understanding of what the evidence is, and therefore to hold policymakers more to account. So that's going to be a great way to help make sure that policymakers quickly, you know, start to use the evidence that's been gathered to help them in making the decisions they make. So what's really important in this, and that is an opportunity and a challenge, is not just to get this information available to policymakers, but if we can make that really transparent to help citizens and ordinary people to be able to also access that same evidence, so that they can then start to hold the policymakers to account, which actually policymakers, most of them will welcome. It's a matter of pulling the two things together to take things forward.
Yes.
Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. That Susan, maybe in the first question you can say something about it if you want to, but I kind of wanted to get your opinion about the dimension of involving other type of stakeholders. I think in policymaking, we've been talking about the data for the policymaking, gathering the data, making it interoperable, et cetera, et cetera. But I think sometimes we have to think about the other stakeholders. And when I mean other stakeholders, I mean the citizens, I mean the journalists, other type of stakeholders in the decision-making process. And I think with your project, you're able to find that equilibrium and the human dimension to all this, to this approach. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Cecilia. First, I'd like to say that I think indeed the transparency, as Michael just said, is something very, very important. So I'd like just to support and to insist on this aspect. And I also would like to mention that actually, when we develop new technology, when we make data accessible, the issue is still there, how to interpret this data, how to understand them. So when we provide data or when we provide technologies, that doesn't mean that policymakers are able to understand them or to analyze them as they are. So when you say just data in itself, it doesn't mean anything because you can interpret them the way you want. So there is still a need to build their meaning all together and in the way that are beneficial for the whole society. And I think this is exactly where involving citizens or even journalists in the process can be interesting in order to make sense of the data and to be able to use them depending on the challenge that we face. So that would be very quickly, first answer that I can do to what you asked, Cecilia.
Thank you. Thank you. Natalia, of course, you can address any one of the questions or the opportunities or the challenges. But I think for me, I think you brought up a very good point, which is sometimes missing in the discourse. They talk about the digital transformation and the green transformation and these transitions that society. And the basis for this transformation is science, technology, and innovation. Right. And sometimes we forget to talk about the researchers, we stick about to the scientists, the innovators, and that dimension, and the information, the data, and how they are the enablers in a sense of this transformation. So so what do you think is the role of these new technologies, the interoperable data spaces and policymaking, and in general, the role of science and technology? I think if you could say a little bit about that.
I think because we are all also involved in many studies, and I think science, what science is producing for us is the basis. So when we're talking about how can I make a policy on climate change, then I need to look at the science. How do I make a policy on COVID? How do I make a policy on smart cities? I need to go back to the science. So for us, science is the basis. And this, even though policymakers are using it somehow, they're not using it in a consistent way. So if I can say here, I can respond to the first two questions. Is what are the tangible opportunities? For me, I would like to say very concretely, open data is one. And then the thing is, the opportunities, apart from the European Open Science Cloud, I like what the Commission is doing about building these data spaces and giving the tools. But what I would like to see is that these data spaces, because science and ESOs is considered one of the data spaces, is that I would like to see the interoperability, or not interoperability, the connection, the linking between what research is producing with what the other data spaces are. So I would like to see somebody building on these bridges. And on the second one, what are the challenges for these new technologies to be adopted in policy making? I think it's skills and training is number one. Because policymakers, we have policymakers who are used in traditional way of policymakers. So, let's do a desk research analysis. Let's do a survey, which they should exist. They should, start to exist, because this is a qualitative part that, we always trust on what other people say. But the AI-driven part, should be the beginning, should be the assistant, should be the support. So in order for them to use it, in order for the policymakers to use it, we need to educate them.
Totally agree with you. I think that the whole idea of skills and training is very important for the policymakers. I think, like was said by the speakers before, that the policymakers are in their inertia of how they work and how they make decisions, and we need to help them approach this in a new manner. And I think also there's a demand by society for the citizen participation, the whole participation in the co-creation process of how policy is developed and how evidence is needed to make the decision making. I think we have a question from the floor. We have time to go ahead and take it. Sergio de Virgilio, if you want to go ahead and pose a question.
Yes, good morning, everybody. So I'm Sergio de Virgilio from DGRTD, in Knowledge and Data Management Unit. And I'm listening this 2 days very interesting meeting about evidence-based, because this is our core business. And I would like to take, I know several of the actors that are today presenting, and I'm very pleased to hear that this is going in the right direction. Now, I would like to reassure for those who are not very familiar with what we do in the European Commission regarding this evidence-based policy. I would say that I fully agree with what Natalia was saying just now about the education of policymakers. This is one of my big challenges since a couple of years now, to present them new tools, to present them with new evidence, to make them familiar and at ease with using new type of indicators. What is always very important is that it started back in 2016, for me at least, 15, 16, as a kind of a technical challenge. But in fact, we all agree that the technical challenge can be mastered, that all the technology we need to do this kind of things are available today. And it turned out to be really quickly a cultural challenge, basically to change the culture, the way we use this information. Now, a number of things happen in the meantime. First of all, there are more and more initiatives, which is very good because it means that it reassures people that there's a general interest at different level, not only at the European Commission level, but also at the member states level, regional level. There are a lot of and you are the testimony of this. But also the population is changing, the population of policymakers, that are people that are more at ease with this kind of technology. Now, there with me, one major problem that will remain to be tackled is the trust we put in these elements. Because what always strikes me is that we are using today a number of sources and documents for policy making. And I can confess that I don't even know myself why we trust them more than others. I mean, it just built up over time probably, and we become accustomed to this. And finally, we accept them and we use them. And then there are the traditional influence about who is better than the other. And what is coming on now with these new platforms and this new technology of using AI that I'm using also internally is why suddenly we have to be so really strong in defending the validity and the trust we have to put in this kind of a new assembly of information and data. But okay, it's good because it means that it has to be at least tackled and overcome before we can really trust. Now, and there is another element that is really clear, and it's the fact that we continue to rely, and we are seeing now more and more progressively in our internal work, we continue to rely on studies. We can really continue to rely on survey because it's the best sensor for the hot topic, I would say. And we start to mix them up with a number of AI-based and driven kind of elements. So I think that the mixture is in the making. Basically, the recipe is changing. Maybe one day we will have only one exclusive source, which would not be good. And I think that we have to find the right balance. Or we can call on, or we cannot call on, or we can do it independently. Our motto has always been, at least from my point of view, to rely on the perception of the citizen in general, but to try as much as possible to overburden them with questions and survey. All of you are knowledgeable of the fact that we are very expert in the Commission in shooting survey and queries and stuff like this. At the end, the trust we can put in them, it becomes a little bit difficult to appreciate because when you are overwhelmed with questions constantly, finally you don't reply very directly or honestly. So we need to find the balance. This is what we try to do. We will try in the future to continue to mix up these different sources of information. And as the most important message from my side would be that mixing sources and cross-checking them is the key element. And we have to cross-check them in order to ensure validity. The validation process at that scale become a big challenge. And who can do the validation of what is coming out when we are dealing with such a large amount of information to handle. So I will stop here. And
thank you, Sergio. That's a very, very good point. Natalia, you wanted to make a comment. Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I think, the European Commission, I think, is one of the front runners in starting using AI, as Sergio said, and we wish that others will follow. But to respond to Sergio, it's not and to make another point, it's not just about the trust in open data, but also it's the trust in open procedures and processes. So what we would like to see based on the open science practices, this is why I'm saying, open science practices, we use them in doing research, but I think the practices should be transferred to other domains like policy making. What I would like to see as a citizen, as a taxpayer, is to see all of this AI that the Commission is doing is very much transparent and documented, you know, which data sources, what algorithms. This would be, you know, I know it's very hard because it's time consuming and things change very, but, you know, it's not just the trust in the open data or the big data, but also it's the trust in the transparency and opening of the processes.
Yes, that's very true, Natalia. Thank you. Michael, you wanted to come in. Go ahead.
Just a quick underlining of that. As I mentioned briefly, one of the MIMs we're working on is fair and transparent AI.
Okay.
And from our point of view, it's a great working group we've got. We're getting some very good input from the Commission and from other experts about the challenges of using AI effectively. And what we're trying to do is to put together the kind of practical checklists, processes, and, you know, how a city can start to properly recall the kind of AI it's using and what it's using it for, to get all of those things in place so we can get something to give people confidence that it's going to be done properly. So we'd love anybody who would like to help us with that so that we can come up with tools that will be really useful to move these things forward. We'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I wanted to come to the European Open Science Cloud. If you could, each one of you maybe briefly, what your opinion is, what role should it play in this whole scene that we're talking about in data sharing, interoperability, engagement with citizens, in how can it help the public administration? If you have any reflections on the European Open Science Cloud, just to reflect on a little bit on that, Roberto, or
yes, if I may, just also to be connected to the previous, also to be connected to the previous part, because I think here an important role. First, I would like to mention that there are other initiatives worldwide that are around the scientific data sharing, but are only thought in some case only thought for the scientific environment. So they are not open for the overall society. So this is a real key point for EOSC. So it's opening to the society, it's opening to offer service to the overall society and not for the scientific to the scientific world. This I think it's a good point for EOSC. And then connecting to the previous question that about of trust, I would like to mention that one of the key points it's recognized to overcome the trust issue is the identification of trusted intermediaries, and probably EOSC could be one of those, could be considered one of those intermediary that it's popping up as a role together with the actual implementation of data space.
Thank you, Roberto. Susan, do you want to say something about EOSC or what we've been talking?
Yeah, I think it's quite obvious actually the role of the EOSC. So first, when we say EOSC, we have to take care because there is the whole EOSC ecosystem with all the projects, the infrastructure that are part of it. Or there is the EOSC association. So here I am more my hat of the part of board of directors of the EOSC association. So I think the role of the EOSC association at least is, of course, to gather the diversity of the voices of the scientific community and to try to make them work well together, and then being able to share this common view about what should be the EOSC, how the data sharing must work in order to be able to come back to the policymakers, and especially here the European Commission. And regarding the role of the EOSC ecosystem at large, here again, I think the main point is indeed the collaboration, but also the focus on the main challenges that we still have. So we mentioned this transparency. I think there is also the impact of the ecological impact of all the new technologies that are developing actually. And this is something that the EOSC ecosystem at large must take into account in order to have a better use of this technology.
Okay, thank you very much. We're running 5 minutes over time. I'll let you say some final remarks, some closing remarks of each one of you if you'd like to. Michael, Natalia, Roberto, whoever wants to go come in and say some.
Well, I just basically to say, it's great to hear some of the other things that are going on. And it's great to see how there's such a clarity about all of this work that's going on about bringing data together, analyzing it effectively, making it available openly and transparently. You know, the opportunity for policymakers is enormous, and it's great that these your project, you've held this 2-day event and helping to pull this community together and then take it forward. So thank you so much. Keep doing your great work.
Thank you, Michael. Natalia.
No, I think the only thing that I would like to say is that, as Michael said, we are all on the same page. Is that we need to really push things going to have small, tangible results. So people, citizens and policymakers, because this is now for us at least, we are addressing and targeting researchers, but this is how the outcome of research can be uptaken by policymakers and citizens and involve them in the process. So I think what we need is small, as I said, tangible results, small, they don't have to be big, so we can introduce them into what these data spaces and AI can do together for them.
Thank you, Natalia. Suzanne or Roberto, final remarks.
Well, it's clear the message from the previous speakers, so I completely share the same idea. And the moving step by step, it's definitely what is important to make things real. And also, if we talk about different, for example, models from business to government, I would also like to mention that we need to enable the governance to governance, because somehow the problem are within the public sector. So moving from the central government to local government is not so obvious. And in the end, we need to let's say, let impact start since the local community. So to have impact there, we need to open the door from this communication inter-government.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you very much. Suzanne, I don't know if you want to say any final remarks.
Maybe just that actually I think we started to experience all of these things, I don't know if I can say that, but because of the current pandemic situation. So actually it's a kind of real life example of how to proceed and how to try to coordinate all together, which is not an easy task, but at least there are a lot of good willing, so it's already something good to take for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. On behalf of the Data-Driven Policy Cluster of the 5 projects, we really, really appreciate your interventions today, your discussion and your input. We're going to move on to the next part of the day. We have briefly, let's see if I can get this to work, because my screen is frozen for some reason. I can't move on. Don't ask me why. Oh, well, maybe I'll try to stop sharing and share again. Let's see. It's not moving. For some reason, my slides don't. Okay, now it is moving. Okay. Now we're going to go into 3 specific tracks. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to explain briefly what the tracks are about. Then we have a coffee break from 11:45 to 12:15. And at 12:15, please connect in the same link and you go directly to the tracks. Following the specific tracks that I'm going to present right now, it will be a short wrap-up session at the end of the day. So the first track is about stakeholder engagement. Okay, like we heard this morning already, we heard about how we need trust. We're talking about alignment. We're talking about the role of the public policymakers and how they're overwhelmed with all these data, and we need to reinforce the training and the skills. We're talking about the European leadership and analyzing data. And so this track is going to be about the stakeholder engagement. That is what we want to better understand what the role the stakeholders play and how we can use these technologies to engage the stakeholders. The moderator is Germana Giaquinto. She's from the AI for Policy, Public Policy. And the track is about, well, I'll read here quickly. We live in a digital world, shopping, working, and even meeting our friends and partners online, of course, with what Suzanne just said about the pandemics. Despite the wealth of digital tools at our fingertips, participation in the democratic process is failing across Europe. We haven't really, I mean, I guess it's unequal depending on what we're talking about and what issues. This may be because the governments have not digitized what they need, the information, like we talked about before with the city's case. And so this track is going to explore how new technologies and tools can be used for this innovation process. We have Fabio Personicini, I hope I pronounced it correct, Jeronimo Arenas, and Pavel Kugat, who is going to do presentations from the different projects on this part of stakeholder engagement. Our second track is about policy prediction. Okay, policy prediction is very important. Again, this is one of the issues that also we're gonna, the data-driven policy cluster wants to talk about. And again, we wanted to go a little bit deeper in those transversal aspects of the 5 projects that we think is important to address. So here, Forging the Future with Policy Impact Analysis and Prediction. And our moderator is Zach Smith. He'll be moderating the section of track 2. The wealth of data at our disposal should not only be used to understand the areas where policy or change in policy is needed, but also to predict the impact of these policies, to the prediction process, where it's going to head us, where is it taking us, giving realistic key performance indicators, which then can be judged upon. So the whole idea of policy monitoring, so we want to understand how policy is made, but we want to be able to help the policymakers predict or where it's going to go, and also define the indicators to be able to discuss this and present this and to address this. So we have Ricardo Monet, Francisco Merdu, and Jervin Silence from the 3 different projects, Policy Cloud, Decido, and Duet, who is going to do presentation in track 2. The last track, I think, is very interesting because it's about the governance of ethics. Here we're talking about trust, we're talking about data, we're talking about confidentiality, and all this realm of information that's coming out. And so the track in this is going to talk about the ethical issues, the ethical legal aspects that we needed when we're talking about handling data. This is very sensitive, and I think it's very important because it's not just how we use the data, but what's behind it, what the sensitivity of the data can also be important to take into consideration. So Martin Tobarra from the IC Legal Consulting Policy Cloud will do a presentation. Alberto Petonol from Policy Cloud will also do another presentation. Vanini Resta from Decido will do a presentation, and Marina Cuguarra from AI for Public Policy will do the presentation. And the moderator for track 3 is Martina Piantoni. She's going to moderate the session for track 3. Short, before we stop for the coffee break, we have to do a small poll. I will stop sharing my slides. And I think, Marika, you're going to come in and...
Yeah, I will share my screen for you, and you take us through the Slido. Yeah, so what we would need people to join us at slido.com at the number 816961. And you tell me when you're ready to go, Cecilia.
Okay, so everybody, if you could please join the Slido. And this is the number. I think it's easier to take the cue from your mobile phone. Go on to the next slide. So the first poll. So the first poll is, what is your role in your organization? If you can start responding to that and see how we're going. The options are not showing up, Marika. I'm not sure if it's because we're waiting for the answer.
I think people need some time to join us at the slido.com, and then they need to type in the numbers 816961. And maybe it's very interesting to tell them also that this is interesting for us to know, because in the tracks afterwards, we then kind of know who you are. So you now know a lot about us, and it's nice for us to know a little bit about you as well.
our intention was obviously to get as much public administration as possible in this whole initiative, because we're talking about evidence-based policymaking. But we also want to talk about the science and technology. So if you're from the science and technology or research background, that was also important for us too. But just to get a feel of who is attending, we see that there's a clear participation of those involved in research development, but we also have policy analysts, we have data scientists, we have public administration, and those involved in engagement. Perfect. Okay.
Shall we move to the next question?
Yes, next question.
Good.
What policy are you involved in? Here, I mean, we briefly heard a little bit about policymaking in cities. Yesterday before we addressed specific verticals on policies that had to do with health, had to do with mobility, had to do with climate change. Are you involved in policy areas, science and technology, innovation policy in general? What field are you in, just so we get a grip on it? The 5 projects together, we have 19 different use cases, and the different areas that we're going to be addressing this whole evidence-based policymaking. So we want to kind of see who's also attending this meeting and the session, and what is your interest, because we want you to keep joined. So we have healthcare, we have risk management, we have urban planning. Good. Okay, we'll wait a little bit more.
Civic intelligence as well.
Yeah, better regulation, that's important too, especially for the next tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Nice. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yes, next question. How much of a difference do you think policy impact analysis and prediction tools and services would make in your job? So this is for those who, we had a big research and innovation community, and then we had different profiles. So obviously we see that it's definitely a positive impact. We definitely have either it's a positive improvement or it will make a difference. So this is good. This is good to know, because at least the work that we're doing in our group is useful. Perfect.
Good.
Okay, so with this, we're ready for the, oh, we have another question.
I think, yeah, we have one more, I think 2 more questions.
Oh, 2 more questions. I'm sorry, that was 3 questions. Sorry, apologies. Next question. Okay, thank you. Are you using it now? Well, it's good to know that you're not, and so that hopefully we can help out. Yes, somewhat. Okay, so we have a bit about, majority have not. So we have some that have a little bit or somewhat use of these type of tools. So good.
Okay.
Perfect. Last question.
This is something very interesting for one of the
co-creation process.
Yeah.
We were talking about participatory policy making and the role of co-creating policies. I think it's very important, or in any type of initiative. So, and you know, that's definitely very high on the agenda now, the engagement of different stakeholders in the processes, be it science, be it policymaking. So are you engaged? Okay, yes, we have a good, strong majority that have been involved in co-creation processes. Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and take a 11-minute break. We should be back connected by 12 o'clock, which is the time that the next sessions begin. And thank you very much for participating in the first plenary session, and looking forward to your participation in the 3 different tracks. Like I said, one is going to be on stakeholder engagement, the other one is on ethics, and the other one is on the predictive policy processes. So see you in about 10, 12 minutes. Thank you.
Hey everyone, so you can now join the breakouts, and actually I think the breakout session start at 12:15, so we've got a little bit longer, which is nice.
12:15, okay, sorry,
Yes.
sorry.
So we've got about 25 minutes, but if you would
Okay.
like to join your room, the room you'd like to go to now, you should be able to see a little breakouts button in your Zoom. And if you can't see that, please write in the chat which of the rooms you'd like to go to, which is track 1, stakeholder engagement, track 2, policy prediction, and track 3, governance ethics. So maybe type in the name of the track or the number of the track if you're looking at the program, and our kind admin Luigi will add you to the correct group. But you should be able to do it by yourself if you can find the breakouts button. So we'll see you at 12:15.
12:15. Thank you, Zach. Sorry.